And then I came back to New Zealand in the middle of 1980, so I had nearly 3 years in Hong Kong, and then chose to come back to Dunedin because at that stage again I needed to look at options for the future and whether I would be staying in Hong Kong for the duration, which would almost be an impossibility really because of the expense of living there. And I could see also that as more of their own local people became educated and as they had more students coming through and graduating from the school, that they would be able to take over their own learning and their own systems, and so there was less need for the people on government contracts to be there, which is great because it showed that the place was evolving. So I decided that it would be better to come back to New Zealand, and I came back to the hospital in Dunedin and in a way worked back in my old environment, still as section head physiotherapist. But there were exciting things happening in Dunedin because the new hospital was just being built, and prior to that there had been a separate medical intensive care and cardiac intensive care, and never the path twain would meet in terms of the staff who were working in one or the other. But with the new hospital that was opened in the late 80s by the Duchess of Kent, and we all lined up to greet her as she came in, but the new concept was that there be a 12-bed intensive care that involved both the medical and the surgical patients. And that was fine for me and for the other physiotherapists because we'd always worked in both areas anyway, and so it was not a difficulty. But there was a real difficulty for the nursing staff coming in and having to treat a medical patient when they were solely cardiac surgery. Cardiac surgery was still in a cocoon in those days. It was very precious and very different and very new, and those staff did not want to treat the medical patients. So it took a long time for them to become confident with treating the medical patients and vice versa. But for me, it wasn't a problem, and so I spent the majority of my time, besides being in charge of the section, but I spent a lot of time working in intensive care. And once you're in a place like that and you become part of the furniture in a way, then you get to be doing things that nurses on the whole mightn't necessarily want the physiotherapists to do if they're just coming in and out. So very much became part of the team and had some great experiences with a very interesting mix of patients, many of whom still stand out vividly in my mind. We had a physiotherapy trust established by then, and we would bring invited speakers to New Zealand. We often had the NZSP conferences as well, and one of the presentations that I gave was To Be Upright is Normal, and I had a video clip, and I also talked about what I was doing with patients in intensive care, which was, again, whilst they were still ventilated, putting them on a tilt table and getting them to stand and do exercise weight bearing, which was a bit radical, and the nursing staff initially were quite wary. But eventually when they saw that what was happening and that the patients were starting to breathe more deeply and as they were starting to wean from ventilation, they were beginning to be a little more alert and we could get them doing some muscle exercise, then I think they became confident that that could be something that was possible. And it wasn't really anything that was very much in the literature, it just seemed common sense to me that these people should be starting to mobilise early. And I think that that's been borne out by research and literature more recently, and that people are mobilised early, and that they now have chairs in intensive care units where people are put in the chair virtually day one after they've had their surgery or whatever. People are being encouraged to mobilise, so it was good to be in that environment and being able to develop some of these things because you had the confidence of the staff and the goodwill as well, and again working very well as a team.